Hi, good day. We are going to discuss the research process, particularly from observation to data analysis. Now we'll start with the observation. Of course, research doesn't begin with title formulation, which is, of course, as you can notice or as you might have observed, it's a common practice to to ask or to ask for a title or to begin with a title or formulating the title. But of course, research, especially academic research, doesn't usually start that way. Okay, so it begins actually with observation because that's how the research as a scientific process, and yeah, as a scientific process, it should always start or begin with observation. That's the beginning of research. And observation actually is when you use our when you use the senses, when we use our senses like sense of smell, sense of touch, sense of our eyes. Okay, so we use this senses in order for us to gather information, to generate information. Now, why it's important to have this initial observation in identifying researchable phenomenon? Of course, this is the only way that could give you some inspiration. Okay, that could give you some sort of idea on where to to get started. Okay, a lot of things discovered in this world, or things we discovered in this world. Actually, they all started with observation because observation is part of the scientific process. Okay, so we have some a lot of observational methods. We can actually use it qualitatively or quantitatively. Qualitatively, we can just use our senses. We can, record. We can have some um, we can have some recordings, we can review the CCTVs. Okay, that's how we can observe. But in quantitative observation, we can use our scientific process. We can do some experiments, we can measure some chemicals, etc. So we can go to the laboratory and do some observations. Okay, so this is how quantitative research and qualitative research might vary at some point when it comes to their observational methods. Now, next to your observation, you need to read the literature. Why? Because when we do observation, as I've said, it's in the initial observation and identifying researchable phenomena is important because this is where you formulate your questions. You have a general questions, okay, and that question would lead you to um, come up an inspiration, okay, to proceed with a researchable topic. Okay, so that's the purpose of reading the literature. You can identify researchable questions, and at the same time, you can find some related theories, especially those theories associated with your questions when you observe. Okay, so you really have to ask questions when you observe. There are a lot of questions you can formulate when you observe. Okay. So another thing, when you read the literature, there are a lot of sources you can find, especially in our modern technology. Online, you can find some e-journals. You can find some books and databases. So that's how you would source that's how you would find for the literature review, finding for these sources. Now, after you read the literature, you can now identify the research gap because when you read the literature, chance is that you would notice, okay, what would be the missing information, what would be the missing, or even some suggestions or recommendations from previous studies. You can generate now an understanding what are the things really are needed to be to be studied so far, or more to be studied more. So that's how you make use of this identifying the research gap. When you read the literature, you can identify the research gap. So how to, of course, how to identify the research gap? By first reading. Yeah, so review existing studies. You read existing studies, analyze their findings, pinpoint missing elements or contradictions. That's how you would find the research gap. So first you observe, and then from your observation, you ask some questions. And then from your questions, perhaps your questions might have answered already in the research, in the literature. So you find it in the literature, as you can also find some relevant theories associated with your especially we're talking here of quantitative research, okay, particularly quantitative research. So when when you do quantitative research, you can find some relevant theories there associated with your questions. Okay, perhaps you have a lot of questions, so there are theories associated with it that you can link with your questions. Okay, that's important because this theory should now be the what the backbone or the lens of your study. Okay, especially in this in this exercise, okay, the one that I'm giving you later, the final output for this course, you have to really have to make sure you have integrated the theory associated with your study or with your output. So now yeah, as I've said, there are steps to identify the gap, review the existing studies, analyze findings, and pinpoint missing elements or contradictions. That's the research gap. So the importance of identifying research gap is that it will give you now a clearer view on what research questions to be formulated. And that's the next part, okay? Formulating the research questions. So importance of well-defined research questions, of course, it will make your study, it will guide your study. At the same time, it will make your study um, clearer, okay, in its direction. So there are criteria for effective research questions. Example, clarity, specificity, feasibility. But okay, we use the SMART concept of research questions, like the specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. That's SMART. Okay. So examples of research questions based on identified gaps. Well, you can find you can always consider these research questions associated with the constructs of the theory. And so you will be able to come up with variables associated with those constructs, which the things I will be discussing more, or I have already discussed in the class. So you need to ensure that this theory, okay, the conceptual framework or the theoretical framework will be converted to conceptual framework, because in reality, it's really hard to, it's really hard to confirm a theory or test a theory, but we can just hypothesize, okay, in order to reject or accept our hypothesis, okay, in order for us to confirm a certain theory. But of course, a theory with theoretical, and with constructs in it. So this construct should also be this construct should also be transformed, or no, not really transformed, but you have to find some variables associated with these constructs. Okay, so this I already discussed this one in our class. So designing the methodology. So next part, okay, now that you have identified your research questions from your research gap and from your theories, etc., or basically down to your observation. So you can now design the methodology. So this is the overview of the research design. We have qualitative, quantitative, and the mixed methods. But in my in this course, or in this in your final output for this class or for this course, you need to come up with a quantitative research design, because we're discussing forecasting here, okay, the forecasting. So you need to relate it to quantitative research. So selecting appropriate methods, we can use surveys, experiments, interviews, but I required you, for the interest of time, I was requiring you to use only the secondary data that we can find, we can generate from reputable sources online, such as the World Bank, anything. I mean, any sites which has relation to development, research, and administration. Okay, so of course you have to consider also in designing the methodology the ethical considerations and data collection techniques. Okay, now After you have designed your methodology, please find appropriate numerical tools for your data analysis. You have to go back to your research questions. Okay. What questions are there, okay, that you can always relate to your data analysis? Like, for example, is there a significant relationship between variable A and variable B? Suppose that is your research question, okay, when you go back to your research question. So therefore, that question will lead you to using a test of relationship, okay, as a statistical tool. So that's it. You always have to relate your statistical, your tools, numerical tools for data analysis. Relate that kind of tool to your research question. So this is not, when you do research, it's not about finding first what the statistical tool to use. Okay, you would always depend this. I mean, these tools should always be dependent on the kind of research questions you have produced. Okay, that's it. So there are common numerical tools we can use nowadays. We have statistical software, data visualization tools like Excel, Tableau, and statistical software. We have SPSS-R, and then we have Python, and a lot. No? There are a lot of there are new statistical software now available. There are a lot of softwares that are now available online, and they are for free as well. So the criteria for selecting the right tool, of course, well, you just have to focus on your research question. That's first, okay, for you to know that the statistical tool you've used is appropriate with your in your study. And another is find the most reputable or reliable software. Identify the common reviews they receive, how they are often being used, okay, worldwide. So that's how to ensure that you are using reliable or credible statistical software. So in conclusion, we discussed the summary of the research process from observation down to data analysis here. So I hope you were able to learn. Okay, so your next step is to start now your research process. So before we end, okay, allow me to discuss the format or tell you the format of your final output for this class. So we have our introduction. That's for your, these are the main sections that I want to see in your final paper. It should have an introduction where there you discuss the rationale and even the research gap and the research questions and even the theories. Okay, you have you use where this research process is anchored on. Okay, so these are the elements that I want to see in your introduction, and then you also have to include the method. Okay, how you are going to gather the data, what are the data statistical analysis tools. But in our class, you have to make sure that you are using forecasting techniques, or even a multiple regression, for example, and the time series techniques for forecasting. So therefore, in your introduction, your research question should be in line already associated with your associated with forecasting. That's why when you observe, okay, it should always be related to forecasting. Okay. So from your observation, beginning from your observation, there should always be a connection already to forecasting, so that your research questions will also be relevant to forecasting. Okay, that's it. That's how you make everything connected and consistent all throughout. So after your method, okay, the discussion of your results and this, I mean the writing of your results and discussion, and after that your summary, conclusion, and recommendation, and then your references. Your results should be in line with your or in your research questions. Okay, and your discussion should be related with what your how you connect the result to your theory, how you connect it to relevant literature. That's how you do the discussion, and then you just summarize them, and then conclude, and then recommend. So your conclusion, you have to highlight what hypothesis you have chosen. Okay, in this study, were you able to reject? Were you able to accept a certain hypothesis? So that's part of your conclusion. And your recommendation, Please understand also that you have some limitations here. So you have to recommend it. Okay, so in order to come up with, in the future, come up with more meaningful or even more improved. For example, there's a recommendation or there's a limitation associated with your methodology, associated with finding the data, etc. So you can recommend it. Okay. And of course, your references. Only a minimum of 15 to 20 or yeah, 15 to 20 references for this class exercise. Okay, so that's your format. And the rubrics, okay, you have here, this is how your paper will be graded. Okay, you have here one, two, three, you have 4 criteria. Okay, and since we have 4 criteria, the maximum points you can get from each criterion is 25 points, and that is excellent. Okay, you have here. Okay, so from 16 to 20, that's very good. 11 to 15 points, that's acceptable. 0 to 10, that is ineffective. Okay, so that's how you will be graded. That's all, and thank you very much.